was very unsure, like, do I want to start something of my own, or I want to be a part of a family business, or what I exactly want to do. Do I even want to do jewelry or no? Time is gone where people were just investing lakhs and lakhs of rupees over something which didn't make sense. Now, people would also invest 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs in some piece, but it should be. The guy asked her out. He told me, write Michelle in that. And I was like, why? Because he's like, that is what her father used to call her. I just opened my contact list. My biggest contact list was my mom. This is how the jewelry market have shifted. It's more onto.
Today we have with us Twinkle Solanki. A third generation entrepreneur and representative of an institutional jewelry brand called Prakash Jewellers, which has been around since 1977. She's going to talk to us about what it's like to be a bahu-in-law in a family business. And I can't wait to know more about her journey and what lies ahead. Hello, Twinkle.
Hi, Akanksha.
Thank you for being here. I know that I really had to twist your arm to get you to do this podcast, but thank you so much for being here and representing Prakash Jewellers.
You know, it would be a lie. It was on my manifestation board to do a podcast in the year 2026. But I was not ready to do it, but I so wanted to do it. So
I can understand. And like most founders that I've been talking to are very, very hesitant to be on camera, which I don't understand. But thank you for this.
Thank you.
So your journey actually does not start at Prakash Jewellers. It starts before, which is when you were working in a corporate job for a tech company and their marketing and business development team. So what did that journey teach you?
I've learned the core of marketing and sales, and one thing have made me my past profile have made me realize is I love sales and marketing. It doesn't matter what product it is. I love doing it, and I know I can do it. So that's what like my biggest takeaway and biggest biggest success have come out of my past job.
And it's such a rare quality to be able to love sales because so many people shy away from it. So the fact that you own it is quite a superpower. It's actually something that I was taught in grad school also, that in one way or the other throughout your career, you're actually selling something. So like might as well learn the skill. So tell me, what have you learned about jewelry over these past 10 years? How has the market evolved? How has audience evolved? What is it that they want now? What did they want before? You've lived through like pandemic and recessions and everything. You've seen it all. So tell us about the audience.
So for me, I've tracked the market for past 9 years because that's how long I've been into this, right? When I initially joined, it was only about the design or about like the money involved in it, or what's the value to it. It was never about what they actually wanted or what it actually represented to them. After pandemic, if you see the huge shift in the market where people have actually started living for themselves, they've started living in now. They're wanting to spend money which actually makes them feel good. Okay, so same have come to the jewelry market. So I'll tell you now, people want to connect with what they purchase. If I'm wearing something, is that what defines me? Is that what it speaks about me? Like, if wearing a loud jewelry, is it like it defines me as a person, what I'm wearing? Or people want to connect, people want to make a sensible buy, people want to show something which talks about them before they talk.
And I love, brand building and just studying the nature of brands. So definitely it's more the story the brand is telling that people connect to rather than the brand itself. Like, of course, the product is a big part of it, but they also want to feel a meaningful connection
Yes.
with the brand.
So basically, it's basically the storytelling. You know, if you explain them how it looks on you, or what happens when you wear it, like you know how you feel about themselves, and when they connect the dots, they are more inclined towards buying.
Yeah.
So it's more of a storytelling, more of explaining me. It's more of like if I'm investing some part of my income into the jewelry, right? The new generation now that they're so self-made, when they actually put the money, with the customers who talk to me when they buy, like, no, this is not me. No, this is what I am.
Yeah.
So when they walk in with that piece where they have owned it, and they walk with a lot of attitude or with a lot of grace, because that's defining them. So this is how the jewelry market have shifted. It's more onto storytelling, meaningful, and the time is gone where people were just investing lakhs and lakhs of rupees over something which didn't make sense. Now people would also invest 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs in some piece, but it should be some storytelling.
Yeah,
It should be
definitely.
something like, okay, this stone was sourced from this, or it was made in such a way, or there were the workmanship that was involved like that into it. So this is how the market have changed.
Yeah, even as something as small as if it's engraved in a certain way, so that is special to me for sure. And
So we have people like, in the engagement rings, they get the engraved, their time of the time the guy asked her out, or the day, or, something very meaningful. Like there was a couple who came to me, and the guy especially. So the girl's father had passed away, in her very early age. And she always had this thing, how do I have my father in my important day, when the guy asked her out. He told me, write Michelle in that. And I was like, why? Because he's like, that is what her father used to call her.
Oh.
And this is how when I show her, and she will be feeling like, he is just there in that precious moment. So this is how feelings and storytelling works.
Yeah, it definitely matters, and for such a high ticket item as jewelry, of course. So, one of the most important transactions in anyone's life is when they are buying the bridal jewelry set, and in the wedding process, that's also the most important transaction that's happening. So, when there's such a high stakes transaction that's happening, talk us through that journey. Like, who is the key decision maker? Is it the bride? Is it the bride's family? Is it, the in-laws, personal stylist? Just, imagine someone has, a family has walked into the Prakash Jewellers store, and who is the decision maker in all of this?
I think in today's world, it happens like the Pinterest is the first decision maker of yours. This thing, because your mood board is ready and the bride knows what she exactly bang on
So
wants.
true.
But I'll tell you, in this journey, the times have gone where the parents or the in-law side of family used to show their interest on what the bride should wear or something like that. No, it's not. As I told you, like now it's more happening of what a person feels when they wear it, right? So now I'll tell you, it's 60 to 70% the bride makes the decision. There have been cases where I've seen that, either the in-law side of family or the parents would have told, no, you should wear this looks more heavier and everything. And the bride would have just told, okay, you want to buy me this, buy me. But I'm just going to put it in the locker because I know this is not me. So now they don't want to risk it. So bride have actually become the main picture, because obviously when we grow up, right, we have always imagined ourselves what we would be as a bride. So they are very clear with the thoughts, what they're going to wear, how they're going to style, what they're going to do, and how it's going to look. So brides are the 60 to 70% decision makers. Of course, the family comes into the role for the 30%, because that is how, like, they are the one who are the financial decision maker, right?
Yeah.
How they want to distribute their cost to the overall jewelry purchase and everything. So I'll tell you, it's a ratio of 70-30%. 70% it's a bride and her team of like a personal stylist or whatever, however she dealt with the people who are going to make her look that day. So it's 70 and 30.
Got it.
So the domination times have gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. And now brides, are they increasingly asking about lab-grown diamonds? Are they more interested in knowing the other side of jewelry, which is lab-grown diamonds?
So, if you ask me, the demand that comes into our store for the lab grown, yeah, they do come. They come for mainly for solitaires. Okay, and in terms of jewelry, there are few, but we made ourselves very clear and specifically clear out there that we only deal in natural diamonds. We don't deal in lab grown diamonds. But what I feel the future for lab grown is it's more into solitaires and bigger pieces rather than the small diamond jewelry, which we specialize specially into making the jewelry out of small size of diamonds. So it's a parallelly thing going on in the market, right? People, I feel like lab grown is for the people who actually never thought of owning diamond ever, and it have made them believe that now, yeah, even they can, because looking at the price proximity.
Yeah, and you know, the markets of natural jewelry has always had its kind of competition cut out for itself, whether it's imitation jewelry, whether it's fashion jewelry. So, you know, when people say that lab grown diamonds are the future and they're going to wipe out natural diamonds, I do feel a little skeptical because, you know, a lot of people have claimed that this will wipe out the jewelry industry, but here we are. It's still very much relevant.
As I told you, there's an audience for everything out there. There's an audience for lab grown. There's an audience for natural. People who like, if I'll tell you, the people who want to go for branded stuff, they're going to go for branded stuff. It doesn't matter to them even if there are A1 copies available in the market, right? And I really feel something that imitates the natural thing is for the people, for the class of people who never thought of they could ever own such a thing, and now it's accessible to them at like a very fair price point, and which makes them believe that okay, this is what we also can have it. So that's a whole parallel market out there. And there's the market out there who believes really like authenticity, the true to nature, the mind things, or which is straight out of nature, and they are not compromising for whatever it is. I still get people who want to buy a lab grown engagement ring, and I still have people who say no, it's a one time buy, right? How can my love be defined with something which I have to evaluate between the cost? No, it can't be. It is what it is.
Yeah, it goes back to what you said about how people are looking for meaning in their purchases.
Yeah.
It's just that. So some people who don't value jewelry as, you know, as meaningful, maybe.
It's very commercial.
Yeah.
I feel like something that's a dupe, it's a commercial thing. People who really, it doesn't matter to them what they're wearing. It's just for the sake of wearing. So that's a parallel market. For
Yeah.
the people, it matters if I walk down and I'm wearing my natural things. I have that kind of confidence in me. Like what I'm wearing is natural, right?
Yeah.
And when you wear a dupe, you know what you're wearing. So
Yeah.
it's a parallel market. I feel it's really commercial out there when it comes to CVD.
Yeah, everything can coexist.
Yeah, everything can coexist. It's a huge market out there for them as well.
So, what's the view of your extended family on lab grown diamonds? Like the older generation, what do they think?
I think it's not like, I don't think so. It's going to be, they're accepting it or something like that, that this is the future or something, because they have seen market more than me. They have seen, if you know, they also know about the culture pearls, or like, you know, the pearls that come straight out of the sea, and how it had its own thing, and now how again the precious pearls have come into the play. So they have seen more history than me. So they trust what they're doing, and they know what's going to work best for them. And frankly speaking, our business as a Prakash Jewellers, we have never felt the hit there, because still now if you see, the lab grown people are still making in the pointers or the bigger stones. They've not yet entered into the intricacy of the designs what the small diamonds can create, you know, the beauty that it can create, because it takes huge labor hours, it takes huge investment, it takes huge kind of workmanship and everything, and obviously you need those cut and margins to reach there, where it's not possible in lab grown.
Understood.
So that's what we think, like what we are doing, we feel it's going to last for longer.
I remember that the first initiative that you took towards the business was hosting an in-house event. So tell us about that.
Actually, genuinely, for the first time, I was not very sure about how I would be accepted if I did the family business or something. I was very unsure, like, do I want to start something of my own, or I want to be a part of a family business, or what I exactly want to do. Do I even want to do jewelry or no? Right? So me and my father-in-law just had a word. He gave me few pieces and he told me, like, host it the way you want it. I hosted it at my house. I just opened my contact list. My biggest contact list was my mom. So she was the one who put like word out for me, like, you know, my daughter is doing this, do come, do visit, do see the stock and everything. We called many people who were not even the part of Prakash Jewellers back then. And of course, my family had a biggest support, like in terms of my like the team of Prakash Jewellers who put the word out there, like whoever was coming into their store, oh, our daughter-in-law is doing something at house, like just go have a look. She has different stock than what we have. And we did pretty good sales, it was visible in number, like, you know, so that is where I gained my bit of a confidence, and that is where my family gained a bit of a confidence. Okay, like, you know, she has into her, like, how to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we actually started thinking about me joining the Prakash Jewellers.
And then from there, you decided to launch your digital presence through Instagram. But I know people would make fun of you that ये आती है कुछ तो करती है फोन पे और चली जाती है. So
Yeah, so you know, like how parents are, they don't like you being much on phone. So when I used to enter the store, I used to take few products. I used to start with doing the camera thing and everything, and they would be like, ये क्या करती है, ये आती है कुछ टक 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 करती है और चली जाती है. I'm like, so one fine day they were like, तू करती क्या रहती है? So I'm like, रुक जाओ, एक दिन आपको ये बताएगा कि ये क्या है.
और बताया, did the Instagram page show its value?
Of course, today we are a family of 65,000 organic followers on Instagram. We have good number of people flowing in through Instagram, not only from Mumbai but from like literally other cities. People are residing in abroad, waiting for them to, like, you know, come to India and visit our store. It is like now my family, my team at Prakash Jewellers tell people, Arey, have you come across our Prakash Jewellers page? No. Okay, look, take this barcode scan and follow us. So that's where you feel the sense of achievement, where they had no idea basically how the social media works, right? And where once they made fun of me, now they are the one who are vouching for it, like, you know, and it feels so good about it, so good. And it's genuinely a teamwork how we have just grown there.
I love the growth arc that this story has, because yeah, I know that pushing for changes is very hard at any level, whether it's your own business, whether it's a family run business, definitely.
But then that's how, like, being blessed, I think, literally in a Marwadi family, which has been a male dominated family, I feel like I've landed up to a very secured place, you know. They don't treat women's like इनको क्या पता चलता है. They have, like, they've given their women's an equal say, and that's how maybe the transition for me was really easy. Because they never demeaned being a woman or anything. They just gave an open ear, like a ear like what they would have given to their own son.
Yeah.
So yes.
And just for, you know, the audience's interest, that's not everyone's experience when they're joining an in-laws business. That's really, even in today's reality, that is not everyone's experience. People are met with lot of resistance. Women are met with lot of resistance.
Of course.
Yeah.
We listen to that every day in and out.
It's good that you had it before you transitioned into your family business. But how is the transition from a corporate to a traditionally run family business like? I know you got married and then decided to join the family business, but it's still such a big change. So how did you navigate that?
Like it's vast. At one point of time you were selling the Surface, and now you're selling the most premium product, right? And at one point of time your complete target audience were men who were into builders, who were into constructions, and now your complete target audience is women's.
Yeah.
So it was a vast transition. It was vast transition in terms of my profile, and it was a vast transition in the place where I joined my in-law side of business, which was not just my father-in-law. It's a joint family generational business that I've entered into. And obviously the first one from the third generation to enter into the business where not even like any son have yet joined into a very male-dominated business. So it was like not very easy, but the transition was quite smooth.
And how did you push for change? Because I know that a lot of like next gen entrepreneurs are always battling the resistance to change that the previous generation has. But you've managed to bring along a lot of change in terms of, creating a digital presence or increasing number of touch points of Prakash Jewellers through exhibitions and trade shows and hosting curated events. In fact, you started with a curated event. So how has that been navigating change and like advocating for it?
So I'll tell you one thing. I've attended a lot of business seminars and everything. So initially, when I used to represent myself, always used to say that I am into a family-run business. So there was one coach who told me, no, start owning to what you do. Say it's my business. You know what happens normally when a younger generation joins? They always join with the outlook like it's a family-run business. So, you get 80%, 90% barrication over there only. You are not much exposed or you won't be allowed or something until and unless you feel that it's okay, it's own mine. Now I am leading it. So that is the one point. Like I would like to say, start owning up to what you do and what you have. Like just call it yours. That way, it will be very easy for you to do the transition. So that was one point where actually I smoothly transited into this thing. And if you ask me, can we come back to the question?
Yeah, so you managed to introduce a lot of new initiatives,
Yeah.
whether that's the digital presence or, brand events. So how, like, was it met with resistance and then how did you convince people around you?
So, very first thing initially for few years when I sat there, I used to question myself. What is something different that I'm doing than my other three, like my father-in-law and my uncle-in-laws are doing, right? And I was fighting with myself because I just didn't want to fill in the chair there. If you are there, you want to get some visible change because वहाँ बैठना है, sales करना है, लोग आ रहे हैं, बेचना है, it's very easy. Even they are doing it. What are you doing different from them? I then started finding out the loopholes or maybe somewhere which we are not yet present. Instagram is something that I've found like, okay, this is a very easy thing that you can do, right? It obviously takes a lot of consistency. I won't say that the content creation is very easy. There are days where you don't feel like doing. There are days where you're very enthused about it. And there are days you feel like, why am I doing it? Like, is it even getting me any results?
Yeah.
So that's how when I started with my Instagram, it's been like 6 years I've been consistent with it. After doing Instagram, the kind of love that people have shown and because of that love it have gone through my organic audience is one thing, and then the confidence I gain from there is where I again started thinking how to retain my customers. There are customers who have been with us for like 40 years, 30 years, a generational people coming from the same family, how to retain that. So that's where we came up with few ideas of hosting ladies in the store, having monthly get-togethers, doing something with them where they feel like they're coming back to home and putting them into some kind of subscription model for months and months, and where they now feel like they can just walk in any time because now it's become their comfort zone being with us. So yeah.
if you were representing just if you were the face of third generation entrepreneurs, what would you say on behalf of them to the older generation? Like if you were given that platform and you had to communicate a message, what comes top of mind?
So I would give it to like the both the generations, you know, the older generation and the generation that has come into play now. Uh, with my experiences, with what I have got in my family, is I've been given a lot of opportunity. They have let us explore, like, you know, now we are many who are into different verticals of this market, who are working as a third generation into jewelry business. So they've never pulled us back, they've never thrown their theory on us. This is how it have worked when we were working, and this is how it's going to work. No, they are open. So be open to what is happening to the market, be open to the shifts that's happening, be open to the newer generation, what they're trying to get into the, you know, very traditionally run business. So have a high acceptance to it, and let them make their own mistakes. They would few, like, you know, they would maybe make a huge hole in your pocket, or maybe not, and you might end up with something great.
Yeah.
So let us have our own opportunity, is what my in-laws have done with me, and I have flourished where I am right now. And to the newer generation, I will tell you, stop nagging on things like they would never let us do it, or this is only how they want to run, this is how they want to do. You know, when the old generation says no to you for everything that you want to do, you know what's their theory? They say you no because they want to understand how much it is into you that you will fight and make it happen. But when you give up in very first or second time, the older generation feels like good. इसमें वो fire ही नहीं था.
Wow.
So the older generation is actually testing you there, and you really want to make work, go for it, and be there and say them what you want to do and do it. That's how they will have the confidence in you.
If you're not convinced of your own idea, then why should someone else invest in you, even if they are your family?
And they are older generation, उनने तुमसे ज़्यादा रातें देखी है.
Yeah,
So they
yeah.
always want to test you, right?
Definitely. And like, as a general rule of thumb, if you want something, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get it. So
Yeah.
why should that be? Why should different rules apply, even if it's a family business? And as we wrap this up, I just want to get your thoughts on, you know, looking back on your journey so far, if there's anything you could do differently, like if you could tell the younger version of yourself that, hey, don't do this, or maybe invest in this earlier, or maybe learn this skill, like what would you tell your younger self?
I would definitely. I never understood myself as a younger this thing. I demean myself a lot. I would be like, just do it. Just if you feel it's right, just do it. Don't have a second thought on your own thoughts. So that's how I've always doubted myself.
Yeah.
So I'll just, if I will be still there, I'll just tell her like, do it. It's gonna work.
Yeah. Yeah. And then even if you fail, it's okay. Like you learn from it and then.
It's okay. I've
Yeah.
cried. I've cried on my failures. I've been happy on my achievements. I've done everything. So, but that's how you learn, right? For me, failures are more important than having success, because that's where you value your success.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.